And at that moment, I fell off the side of the bed and I was dead. My heart had stopped, my organs had stopped, everything had stopped on the inside of my body.
So can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
I mentally flipped. I went down the spiral and I decided if I couldn't beat them, I would have to join them to survive them. The state had been into my home and had managed to brush over my family and had not seen fit to protect me. And my mother suffered severe mental health issues. And even after she got out of the military, even my children's father was spiritually led to me. He asked for me when he was 8 years old. That touched 4 generations of us. In fact, it started before I was a year old. Or when you see them. And she said, here's your one warning, mija. Understand that if spirit gives you an answer or guidance and you don't choose to take it, especially when you asked for it, then understand spirit may not be so quick to give you the guidance next time.
The views expressed in this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only and do not constitute professional advice. In this episode, we explore deeply personal and emotional topics. This episode may contain mature content, including but not limited to sexual assault, suicide, or physical or emotional abuse. These conversations are meant to bring awareness and healing, but they may be distressing or triggering for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. If you are in crisis, please seek immediate help from a licensed professional or emergency services. Remember, you are not alone, and support is always available.
Hey y'all, welcome back to Transformation to Expansion. I'm your host, Lajoie Bradley, and today we have a very special guest. Her name is Diane Evans, and she is here to teach us, well, a little bit about shamanism and then just a lot about life. So I'm really excited to have her on, and real quick, she's going to go ahead and introduce herself to you guys.
Hi everyone, Diane Evans here. A Mystical Journey is my company, and I'm a 5th generation shaman, 4th generation druid, and I'm licensed as a reverend. I've spent my entire life knowing that I was meant to walk this path, and I'm happy to be here today. So thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks, Diane. And I love it. You're just everything spiritual.
Yeah. I was born in Japan, so I have an appreciation for a lot of Buddhism as well. But I have a very eclectic family as far as their spiritual background, from Catholics to Mormons to Pentecostal to Southern Baptist. Really, I was one of those kids that was kind of sent to whatever church was closest. Get there on Sunday. But I've been baptized multiple times. But I committed to this walk multiple times through my life. As a child, when things were being done to me or things were out of my control, I vowed to the spirit that was talking to me, or when I went out in nature and I connected with the elements, they responded. And it started a very early understanding that I wasn't alone, even when I felt alone. And my grandmother was my guide, my teacher, honestly, if without her, I don't know that I would have the heart that I have. She was everything to me, especially as a child. I was abandoned by both parents for some time for a variety of reasons, but she took me in and she really helped show me what love was at an early age. And even though at the time she was very unaware of what some of her family members were doing, that wasn't so good. And I was being abused already, but she continued to show me that there were other things to look at, to listen to hear, to see. She told me very young that spirit spoke to us in signs. You have to be present, Mia. You have to listen. You have to keep your eyes open because they're all around us. You just got to be willing to listen when you hear them or when you see them. And she said, here's your one warning, Mija. Understand that if spirit gives you an answer or guidance and you don't choose to take it, especially when you asked for it, then understand spirit may not be so quick to give you the guidance next time. Don't get me wrong, spirit will always be with you. But sometimes we have to learn lessons before we can truly receive. And so she gave me that warning. And it didn't take long for me to truly understand that. because by the time I was 11, I actually made the mental choice to flip my switch, and I was walking away from everything that was good because the only way to survive was to become what I was living with and around. So my early years were riddled with sexual abuse, physical, mental. I was poisoned. I was
Oh my
put
God.
through so many different situations. We had a pedophile in our family that touched 4 generations of us. In fact, it started before I was a year old. And my mother suffered severe mental health issues. And even after she got out of the military, the abandonment, the feeling of being alone in a foreign country, away from her family, away from loved ones, really did a number on her health. And
Mhm.
she fell into lack and poverty mindsets. And by the time we had got back stateside, and my stepfather was serving in the wars, you know, Iraqi freedom, Kuwait, Desert Storm. My family has served in all of them. And as he was serving and away from us, my mother fell in lack mentality and even started selling me to a man that I had told her had touched me and even burned me one day as a Girl Scout. So it was a very interesting childhood. I had been riddled with a lot of physical, mental, and emotional abuse. My father, though he was a good man, he suffered with alcoholism. And with my mother suffering depression and mental health issues, it really played on my lifestyle. And I had to become an adult real early. I had a younger brother that was everything to me, and I would do anything to protect. I still will to this day, even when our relationships hasn't always been the greatest. That's the one thing he knows is it's only a phone call. Just pick up the phone. I'll be there. I love all my family, and everybody knew what was happening in my family, and there was so much support of, I love you, you don't deserve this, but we can't say anything because we might lose you, or, at that time, we didn't air our dirty laundry.
Right. Right.
No, there was no airing dirty laundry. So it all stayed in the family. And I was the best kept secret for many, many years. And by the time I gave myself freely to somebody that I thought was a friend and I thought was supporting me because of everything I'd been through, and they turned around and announced me and publicly shamed me for what I'd been through, I mentally flipped. I went down the spiral and I decided if I couldn't beat them, I would have to join them to survive them. The state had been into my home and had managed to brush over my family and had not seen fit to protect me. Maybe it was because we were in foreign countries. I was born and raised in Japan, but then we were in California, or we were in Washington, or even in Illinois. And the system just managed to let me slip through the cracks. And it was a really hard life growing up. But at the same time, I am so grateful because by the time I was 14, 15 years old, I was told I'd never be able to have children. But I knew that I was meant to be a mother. And I'd prayed and I'd asked for a live white dove to come and land in front of me. And 4 days before I found out I was pregnant with my son, 15 years later, a live white dove landed on a Walmart jewelry spinner right in front of me in January. And I had just gotten engaged just 10 days prior, and it landed, and I knew in that moment I was going to be a mother. And sure as it goes, yep, 4 days later, I found indeed I was pregnant. It wasn't the best time health-wise. A year prior, I had had medical surgery on a hole that was found in my intestine that had deteriorated the lower third of my stomach. So a lot of people know the gastric bypass. Essentially, what I had to have was something very similar to it.
Mm.
I lost a third of my stomach, all but 17 inches of my small intestine, which had to get wide into 2 pouches because my lower section is still very, very deteriorated. So it was a healing journey. I was not at a place that I should have been able to support a child. It was a
Mm.
miracle that I got pregnant, and I suffered malnourishment, dehydration, and actually died giving birth to my son. That was the first time I died.
And I want to emphasize the context too. Your body, so because this is a big thing I really do believe in. If your body is ready to have a kid, you'll
Mm-hmm.
have a kid, right? I mean, well, your body, well, we'll get to your body in a second. But one thing I really want to emphasize to women too, because I know a lot of women who they feel like, oh, I'm older, so I'm not able to have a kid. It's like, no, is your body healthy? I met one woman, she was like, yeah, I'm allergic to these things, but I'm still eating them. And I'm like, and then she was complaining that she couldn't have a kid. But I was like, well, if you can't take care of
Yes.
your body, how are you going to take care of a second one? So it's really important to make sure your body is healthy, especially if you want a kid. Now, for your context, a miracle happened. Even though your body wasn't at its best, you were still able to give birth a kid, but then you had this near death or no, you died. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience, what that was like?
Yeah, I actually also want to say you're right though about the body, because me addressing that, what was really interesting is it started a couple years prior while I was in college. I had started abnormally bleeding. I bled every day for a year and a half, and they could not figure out what was causing my bleeding. And I was on birth control, but was put on 4 different steroids. And I ended up gaining over 200 pounds on steroids. So I was a 500-pound woman at one point in my life, nearly 500 pounds. So by the time they discovered this issue with my stomach, and I had ended up going in for emergency surgery and getting things fixed, but it was in doing that a lot of things started to change for me, and I was able to get healthy and start feeling healthy again and feeling like myself again as a woman, that ultimately led into me being able to conceive a child. Because between the obesity and the steroids and all of the toxicity in my body, it was dealing with that and purging all that ultimately allowed me to release the pressures on my cervix and my womb to be able to conceive a child. And the scar tissue is still there, everything's still there. There's no actual medical reason why I should have been able to conceive, but I have, and I've done it 4 times. So when I was delivering my son, he was born at 3:04 in the morning on October 15th. And I went in for delivery the day before, typical, in there all day. And they did not check my dehydration levels. And I was severely dehydrated. I'd suffered malnourishment and dehydration multiple times through my pregnancy. It was really rough. But when I went in, they had offered me the epidural, and I agreed. I didn't know as much as I know now, but we learned something. But I went,
Right.
I went paraplegic from the neck down.
Right. That's it. That's
I
all I
had
can
no
give y'all.
feeling.
But
I couldn't move myself over, nothing. They had actually pulled it out, completely stopped it, and I still could not let go of the symptoms of the epidural. And at 3:04 in the morning, when my son was born, just a few minutes before, they came in, found out he was fully crowned, fully facing. He was actually half out, and I had no idea. No, my no, it was the machine. At that point, they went
oh,
into
because you
labor,
couldn't feel. Oh my
and they had me
God.
trying to push via watching the machine. Although they wanted to try to stop the labor at that point because I wasn't in a position to try to deliver. I had no muscle movement. I had no ability to control my muscle. So it was very, very intense moment. My son ended
Oh
up
my
being
God.
wrapped up so heavily in his umbilical cord. He had actually briefly stopped breathing as well. They had to cut him free from the umbilical cord before he was even fully out. Um, and they had thought they had gotten me all cleaned up, got everything out, the placenta, all that. And they gave me my son, and they'd taken everything out of the room. And it was just me, my son, and his father in the room. And I was holding my baby. And that moment I knew something was wrong. And I looked at his father and I said, "You need to take the baby." And he's like, "Why?" I said,
Mm-hmm.
"There's something wrong. You need to get somebody." I go, "Take the baby." And with the last strength I had, I handed up my son to him. And all of a sudden he shouted, "Mom." And I watched his mother come through the door, my mother come through the door. I made eye contact with mine. And at that moment, I fell off the side of the bed and I was dead. My heart had stopped, my organs had stopped, everything had stopped on the inside of my body. And they had to paddle me back. I remember being in the space as they were paddling me. It's kind of funny because I've seen a few movies that depict it where like you're up in the ethers of the room, of the space. And there was this sense of knowing that I was going to go back to my body. I wasn't being called to the other side yet. But it was an interesting moment to recognize that I was out of body, but I was still energetically there. And it really solidified a knowing within myself that there's more to our spiritual bodies and selves and our soul's existence. I had always been really into spirituality. My college thesis I wrote at 15, which was cults versus religion. I was deeply, deeply into the mystics and to spirituality, religion, the Bible. And it didn't fail at this point. Now I was even more so. But it was, I knew that I was meant to go back. I remember feeling this other spirit or this other energy with me. It was warm. Some would call it a light, but to me, it wasn't like that light, that train light that people say is calling you to move towards it. It didn't feel like that. To me, it felt like the warmth of the sun. It was like I was being warmed up and I could feel the support and the love of something spiritual with me. I didn't see any faces or nothing. The only thing I could see was my baby in his father's arms and his father panicking. And my mother, who was a complete wreck and panicking, and his mother as well. They were in the room, everybody was there, and they were bringing out the paddles, clear. And I remember the first take, the second take, and I came back through the third take. And it was a very interesting moment. It was not something I'll really forget, I'll be honest. It was powerful in the way that officially that there's more. You always, I had confirmation in so many other ways. Like I could control elements as a kid. I'd lay in the field and I could ask Spirit a question and all of a sudden the wind would pick up. And I'm like, Spirit, if that's you telling me yes or telling me that this is my direction, I would like you to blow again. But this time blow in the different direction or come at me in the opposite way. And I would feel the wind shift. I would watch the flag switch on the pole, switch directions on the pole. So I had already realized at a very young age that I had a connection to a higher power and spirit. But at that point, being out of body and recognizing my soul's existence outside of my avatar form really put me on another level with my spiritual connection and walk from that point. Even my children's father was spiritually led to me. He asked for me when he was 8 years old. The man I described at 6 years old to my dad was exactly the man I had married. We're divorced now, and it is a different walk now. He fell back into old habits and patterns when the past came knocking, and he didn't know how to handle it, and he wasn't as spiritually devoted as I was. And he's still walking that journey. I'm guided to understand he will come back into our lives when he's healed and he's done the work as he's called to do it. But everybody in this life walks a journey, and we all have to come to a place sooner or later where we're ready to face that and whatever it is. And the things we do along that journey, it doesn't necessarily make us good or bad, in my opinion, but it makes us human. And each one of us, no matter how devastating our actions have been or how high and evolving our actions have been, they still taught us lessons. They're still here to help teach others lessons. And no matter how painful it is, you can overcome it. And there was a reason you went through it. Don't get me wrong. This is coming from a person who's worked through this. There were years of anger. There was years of drinking, drugs, sex, promiscuous lifestyle. I mean, I walked a very toxic and dangerous road for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because I was hurting, because spirit was talking, but I was so angry at what had happened and my lack of control over what had happened that I wasn't ready to hear spirit. I wasn't ready to make that commitment and walk. But slowly, as I lost my grandmother and as life kept evolving and situations happened, college, meeting my first husband, and going through a very abusive, toxic marriage there, basically everything altered slowly but surely. And I had to take baby steps to walk myself out of there. And spirit was always there guiding. I just had to remember, as my grandmother said, spirit's always answering. You just got to be willing to open your eyes, Miha, and see the signs. And that was when I was actually, I'll back up just a second here and mention I was engaged once before my first husband. And I had been with him for 4 years. And 6 months before our wedding, he had actually cheated. I had gone down to Arkansas for my great grandmother's funeral. And he ended up having a fling with the downstairs neighbor, who, on the night I got back, proceeds to tell Jason I had a great time. I
Oh
I
my
walked into
God.
my apartment and I just looked at him. I was like, Jessica said to tell you she had a great time. He was on his knees in front of me begging for forgiveness within a half a second. I kid
What?
you not.
Why?
telling
That's
me
crazy.
everything he had done. Everything he'd done. And it was so just like, and I had gone to my grandmother. I was like, this man had risked everything. When I left for college, we had actually split up and I got date raped by a manager for the company I worked at. And
Oh my God.
he, still being my friend, he had called the next morning after it had happened. And I was in no emotional, I was just not in a good space. And I told him that day he quit his job, he packed his bag, and he moved from Illinois down to Missouri to where I was going to college to help support me. So I felt like I owed this man. I mean, honestly, he was a godsend in a time where I didn't have a lot of support. So I am very grateful for him. And both of us helped each other out of traumatic past with our families and our careers. So when it came time to leaving him, I really was torn. I was like, am I supposed to? I mean, and I went to my grandmother, who told me, Miha, you have to pray and ask for a sign. When you get it,
Mm.
no matter what it is, you better follow. Well, I asked, I prayed, but this time I prayed for me to feel the sun shining on my face and feel the warmth of the sun while I was being rained on. I was living in St. Louis at this time. This is not a normal occurrence. So 4 days after I prayed this, I walked out of my apartment. I'm wearing a bright yellow shirt. The sun is shining, blue skies, and there's one little marshmallow puff cloud in the sky. It's not even gray. I go to walk to my car, and all of a sudden I start getting these drops all over my shirt. And I look down because there's these little gray drops, like wet drops. I'm like, what the? And I look up, and I knew in that moment I was being rained on while the sun was shining in my face and heating me up. And I knew at that moment, I had said that if I receive this sign, I'll walk. I'll walk away from this relationship. And I did.
Mm.
I did. And I
Mm-hmm.
walked into a very interesting space because at that time my grandmother had lost her sight and was being physically abused by an aunt in California. And I was working a promotions business in St. Louis. So I sold off my portion of my business. I went out to California, got her, and brought her back to Illinois to live with my mom and near my mom. And during that time, it's like we're dealing with the housing crisis starting to happen, everything, the economy's falling, tanking. We're talking 2006, 2007, and it was really interesting because as I moved back to Illinois, I moved home only to discover my father at that time was having an affair on my mother with a woman 3 years older than me. And I caught her with her hands on my father in my mama's house while my blind grandmother was sitting in the next room. I'll just be honest, that colorful side of me where I'd flipped my script and went walking on the dark side for a while, it sort of came out. I literally let that woman out of my mama's house. I let her out of my mama's house and had some choice words for my father. And yeah, my mother showed up at home. It was Sunday. We were supposed to be having Sunday dinner. And I let her know her husband had something he needed to talk to her about. I'd be around the next day to talk with her. I looked at him and told him he was a hypocrite. And I had no respect left for him. And I left my home. And it was a good thing to do. But at the same time, it was a really challenging thing to do because I didn't recognize some of the patterns at that time of what I'd been trained or what I had been guided to do in life. So what did that mean? That meant I went rushing after the relationship of the man that I honestly never should have married. I did. And the funny part is this person and I, my first husband and I, the first night we met, we did not get along. In fact, he hated me and I absolutely despised him. I thought he was a very arrogant SOB, excuse the language. And he thought I was just the most obnoxious bee in the world. That's okay. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it was funny because at that time, all of our friends were all the same people. So we kept, and he was new to the area. So we kept getting put into the same parties, the same invites, the same situations, and constantly put together to a point that we started talking and started to actually recognize we were both very strong people. And he actually eventually had asked me out on a date and I had worn down. And I decided, okay, with what was going on at home, I could use a distraction. We were into karaoke singing and a lot of country line dancing at that time. So spent a lot of time hanging out with him. And within a year, he had asked me to marry him. And my brother and I had both moved out of my mama's house. I didn't care how much my grandma needed me. I couldn't do it. And found ourselves in this relationship. And he had asked me to marry him. Mm-hmm. And okay, first off, ladies, I'm just going to, men, women, everybody out there, if you're receiving signs not to do something, I'm going to just promote the fact you shouldn't do it. Okay, here's a full example of this, okay? So he asked me on a Sunday if I'd like to get married. Now, granted, I'm in the bathroom doing my hair. He's sitting on the couch. Okay, first off, red flag. Never should accept a marriage proposal like that. But he asked, and I thought he was joking. So I popped my head out of the bathroom, and I'm looking at him like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, when do you want to do this? He's like, Thursday. And I'm like, he's like, it takes a day to get the license. You got to hold it for 24 hours before you can get married. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And he's like, yeah. And so, you know what? I was young, dumb. I was 22 years old and I ran off and got married. Didn't tell mom and dad before I did it. I am not even kidding. Totally did. Ran. That's hilarious. It gets better. So the car breaks down the day we're supposed to go get married. Okay. My dress gets a tear in it. All of a sudden it rains and then it becomes the hottest day on record. Our bridesmaids was an hour and a half late. The groomsman was an hour and a half late. The justice of the peace was 3 hours late. We were almost a full hour late to our own wedding as well.
All the signs.
We ended up with a flat tire on top of the car, didn't start. We ended up on a flat tire on the way there. And what was even better is I ended up with this running my hose, and I ended up having to stop off at the Walmart, which just happens to be the Walmart where my father is manager. And I worked at another store, and my manager just happened to be in the store and knew what was happening that day. And she sees me and she's like, does your father know? I forgot to tell him congratulations. Wait a second. Why is he here? So we hadn't told mom and dad. So it almost gets busted just before we ever even get to the aisle. And then by the time we're actually at the courthouse to get married, and the judge is proceeding to start the ceremony, my husband is literally tapping me on the leg. Hey, hey, hold my hand. And I look at him like, why? He's like, it's starting. And I'm like, what? And all of a sudden I hear him look over at the groomsmen and go, so do you think these two are ready to get married? And all he says is, it's their wagon, push it or pull it. And I'm just like,
Oh my God.
and I'm like, I was laughing, but it was,
my God.
you know, it was one of those moments that it's like inside of me, I knew I shouldn't be there. Everything in me actually knew I shouldn't be there. Every sign, God tried to stop me at every turn before I got there that day. And yet, because I was too chicken to speak up and actually speak my truth, that I wasn't ready for marriage. I don't even know if I love you on that level, but I didn't know how to say no when you asked. And I was always guided to, you need a man. That was a lesson I had to learn. So I did. I jumped in and I went through 7 years of a very toxic marriage and ended up being pushed into a swingers lifestyle and other things because of his interest. And it destroyed our marriage. And I was very challenged to leave that marriage because of my biblical views on marriage and coming up with, you don't get divorced. That's not part of our belief system. At least that was what I was always told. So I really tried to avoid it for the longest time, but it got so bad that started to get physical, and I knew I had to leave. I mean, my dad raised me up to protect myself and defend myself, but the moment I got trapped in a room and hands were put on me, it was time to defend and fight my way out. And I will say that I came out of that victorious. Not exactly proud of the fact of what I had to do to survive, but he became a stalker, and it taught me a lot of lessons I had to heal from. But a year later, you know, it was funny because that was 2007, 2008, and 2009. I'm dealing with the medical issues and getting my surgery, you know, to fix my intestines and everything. And I'm leaving my husband all at the same time. It's like happening, boom, boom, boom. Toxic marriage, physical abuse, my physical health falling apart. I had developed ulcers, all kinds of things, which one of the things I've discovered after all of these years is one of the first ways my body lets me know that I'm in a toxic situation is I develop ulcers. Every toxic relationship I've ever been in, my body instantly creates ulcers. And those same ulcers in my marriage with my children's father, we're divorced now. We've been divorced over a year. And I have full custody of my children because of the level of domestic violence that he had done. Mm-hmm. But it was really interesting because that journey through that marriage forced me to recognize my own patterns and habits in life of what I chased and what I wanted. My children, in many aspects, saved me. They awoke me to all these toxic patterns that I hadn't fully recognized, but I was living. And I was fighting. Mm-hmm. I was fighting to quit smoking, to quit drinking. I had actually quit drinking. I had actually quit smoking cigarettes, but I was, because of the malnourishment, dehydration through the first pregnancy, I was actually guided to get on marijuana to help with fighting the malnourishment, dehydration. But ultimately, I didn't like being on drugs. I didn't enjoy that, but it was a numbing agent to the pain of what was going on in my life. There are times where you all know, ladies, where the red flags are there. Very early in a relationship, men too. This is for anybody out there, but there's a moment and you know that you're not supposed to be there. Whether you're being physically abused, threatened, the tone of which they're speaking to you, their actions, standing you up, disrespecting you, it doesn't matter. There's a moment that you always know. There's programming and patterns that tell you, though, to stay. You can fix it, you can change it, you can heal them, you can correct them. Please, if you hear anything from this podcast today, this interview, know this. You are not here to fix or to change anybody. You can guide and teach by your own actions, and you can lead the horse to water, but you can never force it to drink. So never stay in a relationship that's abusive or toxic.